Welcome to Monday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com as well as the mobile app. He's Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow, as we break down all that is happening with respect to the Giants and the Seahawks. Monday Night Football has arrived. We got a game tonight. We were on Friday's program. We did a lot of breakdown with respect to that, but we'll build off of that because the injury report, Paul, was not out when we were on Friday, so I want to get to that. But a reminder that the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants is Cadillac, and Big Blue Kickoff Live presented by Cadillac. And multiple ways you can interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You can also hit us up on Twitter, hashtag Giants Chat. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast. So the injury report came out later on Friday after we were on. Let's start on the Giants side of things. Brian Daboll had talked with the media earlier, and he had indicated that Andrew Thomas went out there and was trying to give it a go, and unfortunately just didn't feel right. So he was ruled out on Friday. He'll miss his third straight game at the left tackle position. And then Saquon, who also actually spoke to the media on Friday and talked about what it's been like through the rehab process. He says he's ahead of schedule. The doctors are encouraged, but we then later learned, based on the injury report, that he's listed as doubtful. So Saquon is going to miss his second straight game as a result.
Yeah, the issue with Saquon is really pretty simple. He's been limited at practice over the course of the week. Last week now. I keep forgetting it's Monday.
Yes, it's all a mesh.
It's a new week now.
Indeed.
He was limited. He did some stuff during individual drills. Would not discuss anything specific beyond that. We saw him during the media portions of practice do some cutting, some running, but there wasn't really a tremendous amount there that would make you believe that he was going to play. And so when Daboll said what he said about it'll be a game-time decision, and then they listed him as doubtful, to me, this was not a surprise. I thought all along that there was an outside chance that he would make it for Seattle. And I think that Barkley wants to play in this game tonight. I truly do believe that. But the Giants must weigh the risk factor of bringing him back a little bit too soon and then having long-term effects hamper his effectiveness. And that, to me, is where the whole question lies.
Sure.
Because if you play him tonight, and it's so easy to aggravate an ankle sprain, you could be talking the next 2 months he won't be the same player. That's just not worth it to this team, as opposed to give him the extra week. You've got a Dolphins game in 5.5 days. Let's not forget that either. Sunday, 1 o'clock. 5.5 days, you've got another game. And if he's ready then, fine. Maybe that means he can be as close to 100% as possible, and now you can get maximum efficiency out of him for the next several weeks as the Giants try to get themselves dusted off and back into this picture. I understand the dilemma. So, to me, doubtful was not a surprise.
Yeah, I'm with you. I wasn't surprised at all. Plus, you also look at Saquon's missed time previously with ankle injuries. Now, you can tell me all you want, it wasn't all the high ankle sprain variety, but he missed 3 games one time. He missed 4 the other time, Paul. So, I mean, this would be extreme ahead of schedule if he were to play tonight. After missing 2 games, it would really be almost unheard of, even if you look at other players who went through similar injuries. And Barkley, by the way, did confirm it is a high ankle sprain. He spoke with the media. We know we heard that through other individuals that he had talked with, but he himself went in front of reporters on Friday and said, yes, I'm dealing with a high ankle sprain.
You know what's interesting about that, though, and I don't mean to contradict in any way, but the evidence, the eyewitness evidence, shows that if it is, the high ankle sprain is not your typical high ankle sprain. I think when he says that, he's talking more about the location of the injury as opposed to the severity. Because usually when we associate a high ankle sprain with a player, there's an air cast on it right away, or there's a boot on it right away. They keep him off his feet. They'll put him on crutches, and the guy's basically out for at least a month. That's pretty much the way it works with a high ankle sprain. Well, that's not been the case. Since he got hurt in that game, he has not been in a boot. He has not been in an air cast. He has not been on crutches. And he's been out there with his teammates running some drills. You don't usually do that with a high ankle sprain within the first 2 to 3 weeks of getting the injury. So I question, yes, I guess the semantics are maybe that's physically where it is, but it's not your typical when you think of high ankle sprain, which means the guy has to be immobilized and can't do anything for a few weeks. That's not the case.
No, there's mobility on the part of Saquon Barkley.
A lot of
but
mobility.
Mobility doesn't necessarily mean it's football mobility, Paul. Those are two different things.
That, to me, is why they're probably going to be super, super cautious. He may even dress tonight and not play.
It's possible.
That could happen, too.
But I would think for the sake of maybe having an extra body, or if they call up somebody from the practice squad, if you're not going to play him, there really is no purpose of putting him in uniform. Right. But we'll see whether or not Miami is something that is realistic. To your point, it's another quick turnaround, and then they'll have Buffalo. But the worst thing you could do with a soft tissue injury is come back too soon.
No question.
And make it 10 times worse. That's what, by the way, Andrew Thomas is going through right now. Mm-hmm. You know, when Brian Daboll says they put him out there and he just doesn't feel right, it's because the worst thing you want to do is, well, let him play through it. Don't worry, he can handle it. And then it becomes 10 times more severe. And now you're talking about Andrew Thomas is out without any hesitation for multiple weeks. And I don't think the Giants want to put themselves in that position.
No.
Now, with respect to the offensive line configuration, Ben Bredesen is through concussion protocol, and Brian Daboll earlier in the week had indicated if Daboll and Thomas were both to return, they go back to how the left side operated prior to the injury. So you're probably looking at Josh Azudu filling in for Andrew Thomas at left tackle, Bredesen, I'm going left to right, John Michael Schmitz, Marcus McKeithen, who Brian Daboll said is staying at right guard, and then Evan Neal at right tackle. We talked about this on Friday. The Seahawks defensive line, it's not Dallas, it's not San Francisco. I do think Jaron Reed is a bit of an undervalued player because he does have the ability to stop the run and get after the quarterback, but nowhere near the same level. So
he's not playing the tackles either. He's an interior guy.
Sure, he's an interior guy, but you know those interior guys could create some havoc.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I know. But if anyone wants to make an assumption out of Azudu playing left tackle, who does he go against? He goes up against Edwards, who has all of 2 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss, and 2 quarterback hits so far this year.
Yeah, they don't have heavy lifters. Correct. Yeah. They're more good as a team as opposed to the individual parts. If you're looking specifically at the defensive front, I think they got playmakers on the secondary. Mm-hmm. But as far as the defensive front, it's more of what the group does within the scheme than one guy in particular. Now, with respect to the run game was non-existent against San Francisco. I mean, let's not beat around it. The evidence was overwhelming. Part of that was the flow of the game, and Daniel Jones did not run much. Is this a game where, okay, you know you don't have Saquon? Do you now put an emphasis more on Daniel Jones? It's interesting because when you take into consideration games that Saquon hasn't played, specifically, even if you go back to the Seattle game last season, and Saquon played in that game, and the Seahawks actually did a really nice job honing in on the Giants' rushing attack. Daniel did not play a prominent role on the ground in that game. And I understand that game was last season, and things have changed on both sides of the equation, but my point is, in games where Saquon hasn't played, the trend and the track record is that Daniel Paul has not all of a sudden lit it up on the ground, though I would argue I think they are going to need to take their fair share of chances with him being much more involved than he was in that San Francisco game.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that they've got to take the handcuffs off of Jones tonight. And I think it's got to be more through the air like I did last week against San Fran. It didn't work out that way, and they came up short, way short. I think that, they've got to attack knowing that Seattle does not have a ferocious pass rush and knowing that their secondary is really not altogether in rhythm and not performing at a very high level. I know Jamal Adams is coming back, but he's a box safety. He's never been a really great cover safety. Never. Okay? If anything, they're really good rush defense because of Brooks
linebackers
and Wagner.
Yep.
If anything, Adams will add to their rush defense, which is allowing less than 3 yards a carry.
Yeah, the hustle plays.
Okay? So if anything, it seems to me that it's got to be Daniel whipping the ball through the air and also, unfortunately, to some degree, using his legs because running backs don't characteristically do very well against the Seattle defense. If you're going to get rushing yardage against their defense, it's probably going to have to be through the help of the quarterback's legs.
And that's why I think he's the player to watch. I mean, it goes without saying he's the quarterback, but we're not talking about necessarily what he's going to do with respect to throwing for 300 yards. It's more about what can he do to generate offense and maybe shorten the third downs with his legs. Now, as far as the Seahawks injury report is concerned, they have a lengthy group. that is not going to play, but some of these guys have already been out. So this is not necessarily a dramatic change. For example, they're down their left tackle, Charles Cross, but he has missed the previous 2 games. So there's going to be, like Andrew Thomas, his 3rd straight game out with a toe injury. And then one of their corners, Kobe Bryant, is out with a toe injury. Neither one of those guys practiced all week. But they're getting Reek Woolen back, who is arguably their best cornerback, opposite Devin Witherspoon, who was their first-round pick this year, one of their first-round picks, and Jamal Adams, who you mentioned. So they are getting some players of note on the back end. And as far as their offensive line is concerned, we talked about this on previous programs. There was one point in the last game, they were down 4 of their starting offensive linemen because guys were going in and out. Yet they have scored 37 points in each of the last 2 games. And even though Cross is out, Stone Forsythe has started the last 2 games, and Jack Curhan, who started at right tackle in place of Abraham Lucas, who has been on IR. So you're not inserting new tackles. Damian Lewis is going to play left guard. Evan Brown's on the injury report at center, but I listened to Pete Carroll's conversation with the media. He had indicated that he was hit in the thigh during practice. He should be fine.
Yeah.
And then Phil Haynes will be back at right guard because he does not have an injury designation. He missed week 3. So the interior of the Seahawks offensive line is back. They're going to have their 3 starters. The change is the tackles, but once again, the 2 tackles have been starting over the last few games, and they have done at least a good enough job. Are they not giving up pressures? No, they're giving up pressures, but they have been able to sustain the offensive flow. So the question is, and this goes back to, once again, previous conversations, Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Azeez Ojulari's back tonight for the Giants. Will those 4 guys be disruptive enough where you get a game-changing type of play? Because I think that's what you need on defense at this point, especially since the Seahawks offense, for the most part, has been fairly consistent.
Let's look at Geno Smith for a second. He's averaging 3 seconds even per pass attempt, which is, I believe, the 5th slowest in the National Football League.
3 seconds is slow, which is amazing because Purdy's getting rid of it in a flash.
It's the way the game has changed,
yeah.
Right? Back in the day, 3.5 wasn't unusual. Now he's at 3, and he's 5th slowest in the league. Okay, so he will, on occasion, hold the ball, and that's what ups that average per se, because there are other times where they're getting rid of it within a heartbeat, and that's what the Giants' pass rushers are aware of. He's only been sacked 5 times this year and only been hit 16 times.
Yeah, that's what I said. They've done a pretty good job.
Those are very respectable numbers for their offensive line. Now, the reason that I've been told that that's happening, and, I look at the tape too, but talking to some scouts, they're saying that Geno is a perfect fit for this offense. They have really got this thing in unison with what he does well. And he is so comfortable, and this is why last year he wound up having way beyond a career year. He busted out after basically 10 years of nothing, of mediocrity to garbage. And last year had a great year, and primarily because they were saying to me, Pete Carroll's offense, with what they're doing in Seattle, he is so confident, he is so comfortable. On times when he's got to get the ball out right away, he can. And he usually always makes the right decision as to where to put the ball. That's the thing. He won't put it in harm's way. He's finding the right guy in a flash. And when you got a quarterback playing that way, it's going to reduce the amount of mistakes that he makes, and it's going to make it a lot harder for you to beat him.
Well, I think what's helped him, just to piggyback off of your point, remember, 2021 was Russell Wilson's last year. Geno was on the roster as Russ's backup, and Shane Waldron, who came in as the offensive coordinator, that was his first year installing the system.
Right.
So what I think helped is Geno, he wasn't playing as much. There was a point where Russ got hurt. If you remember, middle of the season, he filled in. But for the most part, Geno was able to take a step back and fully digest the scheme. Then he takes over as the starter in 22 when Russell leaves to go to Denver. And I think that helped him. You're talking about now, Paul, that's 3 straight years of being with the same play caller and the same scheme. You're going to tell me that hasn't made a difference?
It's pretty crazy if you think that that's a coincidence. I have to believe there's something to it.
I'm completely with you, and that's why I'm selling that, because this is not to make excuses, but if you go to the early stages in his career, Geno did not have that luxury with the Jets.
No, he did not.
So
he also never showed anything.
No,
I mean,
well,
trust me, he was given up for dead as an NFL quarterback.
Yeah.
In fact, most people probably thought Seattle was insane when they figured that they would give him the starting job after they traded Wilson to Denver.
But what I would argue is the Jets also didn't provide the ability for him to truly also show what he could do, because it was a revolving door
He had a cup of
coaches
coffee
and
here.
playmakers. Yeah, but he was there.
And nobody here was clamoring to keep him.
No, because, once again, he was brought in as the backup. I know he did start for that one game with respect to Eli Manning, but at the end of the day, they weren't bringing him in to save the day as the starting quarterback.
No.
Seattle brought him in initially as the backup, and then they said, all right, hey, we're going to go with Geno. We're comfortable based on what we've seen behind the scenes. The other thing that I think is important to note with respect to the offense, the missed tackling. We talked about Wink Martindale speaking to the media last week, and he said, hey, watch Monday night. Keep a tally. Okay? Well, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people out there that are going to get their pen and pencils out to determine whether or not the missed tackling is cleaned up, because you look at Kenneth Walker, you look at Zach Charbonnet, these guys are physically minded players.
Mm-hmm.
They thrive in terms of getting tackled because they know how to bounce off of defenders. So you've got to keep a 5-yard run a 5-yard run. You cannot allow leakage in that department.
The best way I can describe this, for some of you older folks who know the black and blue division, they used to call that the NFC Central, where you had the Lions and the Vikings and the Packers and the Bears. And they used to call it the black and blue division because there was a lot of extra physicality, specifically in the run games of all those teams and in the rush defenses of all those teams. Well, that's what this Seattle team reminds me of. They're a black and blue division team between Brooks and
Bobby Wagner.
Wagner.
Yeah.
They're just thumpers against the run. And their running backs get yards after contact. So that's what they are. They're a black and blue division type football team. They're not your typical West Coast team who's going to want to be a little bit more finesse and fling it around. They're even not like the old Seattle Seahawks that had the Legion of Doom in the secondary. No, that's not what this team is like. They're an old black and blue division, run stuffing, run yards after contact kind of team.
Well, that's why you have to be well-disciplined in a game like this.
Sure you do.
Because, they're just going to run at you. They're not like the Niners. They're not going to put all the bells and whistles out there and try to catch you off guard. They're going to run right in your direction. And
Walker will have some cutback ability, too.
Yeah, well, that's why, once again, if he's in front of you, you got to bring him down, because I think that's going to define this game. The other position that I don't think gets enough attention, but I think is important to highlight, is the Seahawks don't have flashy tight ends. If you played fantasy football, you would not be enamored by these guys. But they're key in terms of the blocking with respect to the run game, and also Geno doesn't hesitate in dumping it off to them. And it looks like Will Dissly's going to return. They have Noah Fant. They have a few guys that can get some of the hidden yardage, is my point. So the role those guys play in the trenches in terms of additional blocking and in the short yardage area, that could be the difference between a 3rd and 7 versus a 3rd and 4 for Seattle tonight. And that's why I would not get too caught up in the numbers. You look at the receiving statistics, these guys are not lighting things up, but if you watch Seahawks games, they do a lot of the dirty work. So I think it's easy to highlight DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, but I would keep close tabs on these tight ends. Geno has been revolving around them and utilizing them game in and game out. So whether it's a key 3rd down conversion, something to help open up things for Kenneth Walker or Zach Charbonnet, those tight ends have put their stamp all over this offense thus far.
See, I'm going to go elsewhere. For me, the X factor is Smith-Njigba, because he has barely done anything through their first 3 games.
Well, he hasn't had an overwhelming amount of targets. It's much
not
like,
much.
you could say Jalen Hyatt's in the same boat. It's not that they're bad players.
Okay.
It's just they have not had a lot of at-bats.
Right, and that's my point. That's why I think he's the X factor tonight, because it's easy to sleep on a guy who hasn't had many opportunities. But all of a sudden, there's going to be a week when Jalen Hyatt's going to break out. I don't know when that week is going to be, or when Smith-Njigba is going to break out. And they're going to have a really big game. It's going to happen for both of these receivers at some point during the course of their rookie seasons. For the Giants' sake, I hope it's not tonight with Smith-Njigba, because he's got a lot of ability.
Absolutely. He was taken early in the draft for a reason. And Pete Carroll has been asked about this at multiple press conferences. He says, we just need to find other ways to get him the football, because 14 targets, he has 9 receptions on those 14 targets. It's not as if Geno and him have not been on the same page. It's just, once again, you utilize the tight ends, you utilize the running backs.
Yeah, for a whopping 57 yards, though.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not telling you his numbers are jumping off the page, but you can't make the argument in fairness. You can't say Jalen Hyatt has talent and upside and then point to his numbers.
Oh, I'm not making that argument.
No, I'm talking about in general. If you're comparing,
I'm saying be very careful.
Yeah,
be very careful.
I'm just talking.
Be wary. Be scared of those two guys.
Because
Hyatt on the Giants side, Smith and Jigba on the Seahawks side. Because I think Seattle should feel the same way about Hyatt, especially with their secondary and the way that they're giving up yards by chunks, giving up the most big plays of any defense in the league. You think Jalen Hyatt hasn't figured that out by looking at what he's looking at?
No, absolutely. That's why you look at the Seattle secondary, you just wonder, some of these guys they're getting back, is that going to make a difference? Or the Seattle secondary is just who they are at this point, and they're going to continue to give up some of those explosive plays. I'm sort of in the middle ground. I do think Riq Woolen had a fantastic rookie year, and I think getting him back is going to be huge. And Witherspoon has played pretty well, all things considered. You can tell me all you want. You don't think Jamal Adams is a good cover guy, but he's definitely a hustle guy where he can run to the football and help with the tackling. But I think Riq Woolen, having him back opposite Witherspoon, can go a long way to help shore up some of the issues they have on the back end.
I got Witherspoon down for 9 completions and 2 touchdowns on 22 targets. Not exactly a great start to his rookie season.
I've seen things from just watching. I think he's handled himself quite well. And, listen, you're going to give up plays. Deonte Banks is going to give up plays. So
no
you're not expecting a guy to come in and be a shutdown
guy. But all rookies make rookie mistakes.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
And the key is, for the opposition, you have to make those things fatal. You have to make the team pay for their rookie mistakes. Just like teams want to do that to Hawkins and
Banks. Hawkins and Banks, yeah.
I mean, when they make mistakes, other teams want to make the Giants pay for those. They haven't really done that to this point, to be frank with you. Banks and Hawkins have done a really good job. Banks in particular has been terrific.
Speaking of that.
But he will make mistakes at some point too.
I thought Jerome Henderson, who spoke to the media on Friday, was very forthright and forthcoming, if you noticed, with respect to his analysis of the young corners. And he even said, hey, they went back with Trey Hawkins. They watched the Niners game, and he wanted a little bit more physicality out of him with respect to tackling. And they had some heart-to-heart conversations. He's been happy with the coverage, but young guys also have a long way to go in terms of the tackling, because we're talking about missed tackling. Cornerbacks are critical in helping with tackling.
You're not kidding.
Right? Because we always focus on the coverage, but the good run-stopping teams, the corners are engaged in helping the big boys up front stop the run.
I'm so glad you said that, because I've been trying to tell people all week, Metcalf and Lockett do a really good job of blocking downfield. They allow some of those short to medium runs to become longer runs.
Sure.
They've always done that. Both of these players are very good at helping to turn medium kind of plays into bigger plays. The Giants secondary better make sure they come up and support when necessary.
And that's why, if you want to keep yourself in games and you don't want an offense that put up 37 points the last 2 games, the best way to do that is you get back to the fundamentals, which obviously has been an issue for the Giants. And then, can the offensive line give Daniel Jones an opportunity to target the likes of Jalen Hyatt and Darren Waller? It comes back to the same issues we've been talking about all season. Can you find a way to shore that up? If you do, then you could more than compete with Seattle. You can't? It could very well be a duplication of what we've seen. Few announcements before we open up the phone lines at 201-939-4513. Giants Huddle Podcast, you can check that out on your favorite podcast platform. You can also go to Giants.com/podcast. October 2nd, which is today, the Giants are going to host the Seahawks on Monday Night Football. They're going to be celebrating Latino Heritage Month in partnership with Ford and supported by Duncan, PNC Private Bank, and the City College of New York. Fans attending are encouraged to arrive early to enjoy sampling of Latin cuisine, dance exhibitions, live music, giveaways, and more. Dedicated tailgate zone will be located just outside of the Verizon gate. As far as tickets are concerned, you have 2 options. You can still pursue a Giants season membership as well as single tickets. For a season membership, they're now available. Learn more about all the exclusive member benefits. You can visit Giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available for single game tickets. They're also on sale now. You go to Giants.com/tickets to secure your seat. Run or walk with Giants legends. Giants Foundation will host a 5K race and kids run that's presented by Quest Sunday, October 8th. 9 a.m. Eastern, MetLife Stadium. Net proceeds will benefit the Giants Foundation. All participants will receive a commemorative T-shirt. And after the race, you can stay for a post-race festival with appearances by Giants legends and a live DJ. Register now at Giants.com/5K. And the Giants' official connected TV streaming app is Giants TV. It brings you original video content and game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV, it's free. It's on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, as well as the Giants mobile app. All right, let's open up the phone lines as we move forward here on Monday's edition of BBKL. We check in with Randy in California. Randy, what's happening?
Good morning, guys. How you doing?
We're doing well. What's on your mind?
Hey, I had a question for you. So at the end of the season, I mean, I know Neil's doing everything he can to try to get that position down. But do you see at the end of the season, maybe next season, moving him into guard? And instead of going into the draft doing the same old offensive line hunt with another rookie, do you think maybe we can give up a high-round pick and maybe try to sign a high-priced veteran to seal that spot up so we can start throwing the ball?
Well, first of all, for a high-priced veteran who's a really proven left tackle or a right tackle, most likely those teams are going to retain their rights or give him the franchise tag. So I would say if you're expecting to find a game changer that way, it's probably unlikely that that's going to happen. Paul, as far as moving Evan Neal into guard, and we've received a lot of phone calls, I mean, first of all, you got to take into consideration, you got McKeithen and you got Azudu. Two young guys they're very high on. So you have options already at guard. I don't think you're going to push either one of them out of the way.
Bredesen's not that old either.
Bredesen too. So it doesn't make any sense. And also, Neal and his size and his length may not be practical also to play guard. So,
it's not.
Yeah.
I laugh at all these suggestions about this because Neal does not have the physical tools to play guard. Okay? He'll never get leverage at his size and length. That'll never happen. And then the other thing is his footwork is not quick enough. Now, I know you're going to say to me, well, is he quick enough to deal with guys off the edge? But that's a small box that he's dealing with his footwork there. Yeah, does he have to improve it? Does he have to get it better? Yes, he does. But now, if you're trying to put him at guard, and now you want to pull him out in a zone scheme kind of running game, or get him out to pull the other way on a counter, he's got no chance. He doesn't have that kind of athleticism. So basically, if you put him at guard, you can throw out 3 or 4 chapters of your playbook. I mean, that's how much that makes sense. It makes none.
Yeah, I'm pulling for him too. You know what I mean? I hope he really does because I would love to see that offensive line finally take that step so we can start throwing the ball. But it's been a revolving door and a problem for years.
Well, Randy, in fairness, though, that's going to rely on the 4 other guys on the offensive line, too. One guy alone is not going to save that, too. So you got to take that into consideration and appreciate the phone call. Thanks for giving us a ring. You know, you could have a breakdown at one position, but if the other guys play well, they still may not be able to cover up those issues, vice versa. It goes both ways.
Look, I get it. Nobody wants to have any patience with Evan Neal because he's played, 17 regular season games in 2 years, given the fact that he had the sprained MCL last year, amongst other injuries. Yeah, I get it. Patience. Patience is something people don't have, especially with a top 10 draft choice. I totally understand that. But that's your best bet. If you're looking for the Giants' future right tackle, he is your best bet.
And also, when you bring up the volume of games, and I've mentioned this multiple times, he just finished his rookie year. It just wrapped up.
Right.
So you're now entering year 2. Normally, when we talk about tackles, Andrew Thomas, if we had the same conversation about Andrew Thomas after year 1, people wanted to get rid of him too. So it's more of a reason why this idea that if a player struggles, you immediately start to look at other options, I don't think that's practical. I think if you draft a guy as high as you did with Evan Neal, you are committed that you're going to buy time and see how it pans out.
By the public's reaction to this poor guy, you think he's Tony Mandarich. Right?
Well, because, right now, I think the offensive line has been a troublesome area, Paul. So everyone.
And some of you out there probably are a little too young and don't remember Tony Mandarich, but he's the poster child for being the super Godzilla-like, mammoth, unstoppable, ferocious tackle who is going to be the prototype and will be a future Hall of Famer, and everyone forever will be measured by Tony Mandarich, who got drafted into the NFL and was a complete bust. And I think didn't even make his 4th season in the league before he was out.
I can look that up, yeah.
Of course, he had other issues off the field, too, with obviously that during that era of the NFL, there were a lot of chemical issues as well.
Sure. Well, he was in the league
but he was a quarterback. Got John chiming in here with Jamarcus Russell.
1989 to 1992 with the Packers, Mandarich, and then 96 to 98 with the Colts.
Yeah, but didn't start a whole lot either.
Sure. But, I mean, he's still, for a guy under that label.
Well, he was the 150% can't miss, like King Kong Godzilla tackle.
Yep.
And total fizz.
Well, that's why the draft is an inexact science, as we've mentioned multiple times. He actually, I'm bringing up his Colts numbers. He started all 16 games in 1997. He started 10 in 98. So
did he have a full season
towards
as
the
starter?
latter part of his career?
I don't even remember that because they were. I guess they were not very impressive games.
No, but
he is always known as like one of the biggest busts ever.
Well, Green Bay 3 years and then 3 with the Indianapolis Colts. But when the Colts brought him in,
he did start for one full season.
Yeah, I mean even 10 games in 98.
I stand corrected on that.
Yeah,
but I don't stand corrected on his production.
Well,
he is regarded as an all-time bust.
I was just saying that he was given a second chance with Indy, and they did utilize him as a starter. All right, let's head back to the lines. Eli's in Long Branch, joining us here on BBKO. What's happening, Eli?
Hey guys, how are you?
We're doing all right. What's on your mind?
What's going on? By the way, I met both of you both at Giants training camp and everything. It was cool to meet you guys.
Well, thanks for coming out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What do you? I mean, the team looked. All I gotta say and everything is the team looked very good at everything then and everything. But these past 2 games and everything, we obviously haven't looked too good. About the Niners game and everything. What do you call it? I thought and everything on the 3rd and 15. I'm sorry to go back there and everything. I know it's been a while and everything, and we're all moving on to the Seahawks game now. But on the 3rd and 15, and the 3rd and 12s and everything, I thought and everything we should just play like a more like basic kind of defense and everything instead of blitzing at all. Just basically line your guys up at the 6 or line your, just don't let you get those 15 yards. I'll give you, 5 yards or whatever, but I'm not going to let you get those 15 yards or whatever.
Well, Eli, you could argue that guys were in position on both of those plays you're referencing, and it was missed-tackling that led to the first down. I don't think it was necessarily the scheme or the play. I don't really think it matters what the alignment was.
I saw Dexter miss a tackle and everything on one of those things. He was right in position and everything. You just while were you watching the film? He was right there. I could have dove for him. He just
See, that's why I'm against you on the scheme question, because I think that, and I know you're a big guy on tracking first downs and third downs and stuff. You probably don't have this though, Lance. How many of those third down conversions were because of missed tackles or yards after contact? See, it would be a schematic problem if the bulk of those came before there was contact or if there were no missed tackles.
Yeah, nobody was in the vicinity.
But sure. I would submit to you, just by going off memory, and I don't have numbers on this, that there were a bunch of those situations, especially the 3rd and longs, where missed tackles and yards after contact allowed for San Francisco to move the sticks. In other words, there were guys in position to make the defensive play to get them off the field, and they didn't do it, which means it's an execution problem. It's not a scheme problem.
I got you. Well, I also feel like in everything going back to last year and everything, I remember there were several plays and everything that we were in like a 3rd and long or something like that. And they just, I don't know if it was a scheme problem or whatever. They converted it, of course. I think we're going back to the Baltimore game last year. I think they was one of the games and everything where they just they had a 3rd and forever and everything. And
well, Kenyon Drake had a few big runs, if memory serves me correctly, in that game. I mean, they had a problem stopping the run, but they had a problem stopping the run all of last season. But as I echoed earlier and what Paul further emphasized, I think this is more of an issue of the fundamentals and guys not getting in position, because you go back to that 3rd and 15, Purdy threw a short pass to Deebo Samuel. He gained 30 yards when it was all said and done on that play. The 3rd and 13, Purdy, another short pass to Christian McCaffrey. He picked up 17. And then the 3rd and 12 was when Leonard Williams had the roughing the passer, and Kittle got 11 on that. And once again, that was a short pass into the flat, in which then all of a sudden he became a bowling ball and started bouncing off a guy. So it's not as if he's throwing the ball, Purdy, down the field 15 yards and everyone's looking and watching. This is guys are in position and they're just not wrapping up and bringing a player down. That's the gist of it.
But doesn't it create more solo tackles and everything? I mean, you guys
Doesn't
said this
matter.
as well and everything.
Doesn't matter.
When-
Your defensive players are paid to tackle.
Yeah,
I don't care if it's a
I
solo
agree
tackle or
with you, but I'm
not. Get the
saying,
guy
but
down.
Wouldn't it help if you see you're having a problem tackling and everything, especially off a short week and everything, where you didn't have time to prep and everything? You'd think you want to get more game tackling and everything.
Well, but in fairness, and listen, Eli, we'll let you go and appreciate the phone call. And Wink talked about this. They went through the circuit of tackling during the week, and they didn't have that luxury the last week. But if you go back to the Samuel play that I was referencing, Paul, that was the play where 3 guys were in the vicinity, and then he launched forward still to pick up the first down. So to the caller's point, if you're arguing, well, you don't want one-on-one, well, you had 3 guys there, and you still didn't stop
I remember the
them.
play.
So, I mean, I don't understand the point from that standpoint. I would say guys, once again, were in position to make plays. The execution just, unfortunately, did not match. James is in Georgia joining us here on BBKL. What's happening, James? What do you got for us?
Hello?
James going once. James going twice.
Hello?
Yes, James.
Hey, I'll keep this short and sweet.
James, are you with us here on the program?
My face hit the mute button again. I'm sorry, guys.
Okay.
That's okay.
Well, it sounds like we woke you up from a nap, apparently. We heard a door swinging open. And
What do you got for us?
I got a lot. But I'm going to say let's go Liberty. Let's go Giants. And let's just get some production out there. Let's not start slow. Get off to an early start. Get off the bus. Don't leave our pads at home. Tackle somebody, wrap up. Wink said take a tally, see how much they don't miss. I know everybody's going to be looking, but, last game, did not miss being on Deebo Samuel twice on one of those plays. So, let's just have a good game. Monday Night Football, I know records aren't great on prime time, but here's the opportunity any given Sunday, Monday, Thursday to turn that all around. Like I said, let's go Liberty, let's go Giants.
all right, James, appreciate the phone call. I'm glad that we were able to squeeze him in under the circumstances.
It's funny. In looking at the game, and I obviously watched the Dolphins yesterday too, already anticipating next week's game because you have to always look ahead.
Yeah. Well, and they happen to be playing Buffalo, who's
I know.
also the next opponent.
I know.
So
it was great. It was great to be able to watch
yeah.
that. It's. I know it's the first week of October, but we're now to that line of delineation where you can't talk about September football being an extension of the preseason anymore. This is the time now where teams need to show what they really are. Okay? The Giants need to show up and be the Giants tonight. Let's not make any mistake about that. I stand by what I said. The Dolphins are a playoff team. They are not a Super Bowl team. I said that after the 70 points last week. People, of course, on Overreaction Monday went bonkers. How could you say they're not a Super Bowl team? I could say that because you saw what happened yesterday. They got punched in the mouth by a team in their division which has owned them for the last how many years? Okay, that's why they're not a Super Bowl team. The bottom line is you will see so many Jekyll and Hyde teams. We talked about this before the show started. San Francisco and Philadelphia are the only 2 undefeated teams in the National Football League today. Every other team in this league has had at least one game, or maybe more than one game, where they're shaking their heads at the film and saying, that's not us. That's the way this league is the first month of the season. I'm sorry, folks, but you've got to live with it. It's been that way for years, and it's not going to change. But now for the Giants, it's game number 4. It's time for the real Giants to show up. It's that simple.
Well, I would say your point holds true for even previous Super Bowl participants, right? I mean, you could point to a rough game or two for every Super Bowl participant.
Of course.
Right? I mean,
that's the way the game is built today.
Yeah, I mean, Tampa Bay, when they were with Brady and they played the Chiefs that year, the Chiefs beat them earlier in the regular season, right before they went on a bye, and they didn't look great in that game, and then they went on the bye, and they came back, and they looked like a completely different team. So I'm just bringing that up in terms of Miami. They could very well get their act together. I mean, they had a rough game against Buffalo. I mean, they still were able to move the ball and put points on the board.
Again,
they had turnovers, and the offensive line did play very well.
You don't want to play overreaction Monday either
and that's
to
more of a
this
reason.
game.
Correct. Exactly.
But there was a tremendous amount of overreaction after they got their 70 points against the Denver team that did not show up.
You know why, Paul? And I
That's
think
the way it's always is.
We live in,
I get it.
We live in a world where everybody wants to crown everybody immediately.
I know.
And everybody wants to dismiss everybody immediately. There's no, let's take a step back and let's wait 3 or 4 games before we have a better idea
Well,
of what a team
because
is.
you need a bigger sample size than one game, or for that matter, 2 games. Because you could see, we talked about this, Dallas crushes the Giants. The Cardinals pretty much handed it to Dallas. That's the way this league is.
By the way, the Cardinals gave the Niners some trouble, too.
How about Tennessee? Last week, King Henry, he wasn't even a frog. He got his crown back yesterday, didn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, they steamrolled yesterday and looked like they were a bona fide contender again.
Which just goes to show you it's based on matchups, right? Because the game you're referencing, Paul?
It's about matchups and it's about inconsistent play the first month of the season. You put those 2 things together, is it any wonder that you get so many upsets?
No, not at all. But I just wanted to emphasize your point about Tennessee. They went up against the Cleveland defensive front, okay, right, with Myles Garrett and Dalvin Tomlinson and Zadarius Smith. And Derek did find as many holes, and Tennessee's offensive line has had major issues. You know, we talk about the Giants. Look around the league.
I know.
There's a lot of teams that would join that parade. And then they went up against Cincinnati, which, hey, DJ Reader, Trey Hendrickson, but Hendrickson's more of a pass rusher. A little bit different in terms of maybe some breathing room up front.
But a heavyweight team,
But still
nonetheless.
a heavyweight team,
By
absolutely.
most accounts, a Super Bowl contender.
But, well, the way Cincinnati's offense is performing, Paul, they better
Burrow's
get their act
calf
together.
has a lot to do with that,
No,
too.
absolutely. But I'm saying they better get their act together sooner rather than later, or else they may not even make the playoffs if this carries out. Because we saw the Lions last season; they went 1-6, they went 8-2, the final 10,
right?
And they still didn't make the playoffs. So there's only so much of a hole you can dig yourself in. Let's head back to the lines. Joe is in New York, joining us here on BBKO. What's happening, Joe?
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hi.
Same to you.
Lifelong Giant fan. And a couple of questions about some of the stats that have been thrown around about Daniel Jones lately. First one, his primetime record is 1-11, I believe.
All right, before you go any further, in the 50-plus years of primetime football in the National Football League, the New York Giants are more than 30 games under 500.
Okay.
So this is not unique to Daniel Jones. Okay? That goes back all the way to Tarkenton.
Thank you, Paul. I was not aware of that one.
Okay.
But this has been a knock against Daniel Jones that he's not stepping up big in primetime games. But I would just be curious to know, I mean, I'm counting the 2 games this year against 2 of the top teams in the conference, Dallas and San Francisco.
Yeah.
All the other games, I mean, I don't know if the playoff game against Minnesota is counted in that prime time.
No. I'm just going regular season.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to know exactly how many other of those games have been against top-flight teams like that, and what, you know, because last year was the first year the Giants had a winning record when he was there. You know, he didn't have a lot around him his first 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So just taking that stat just in and of itself without putting some context around it, you know, it kind of skews it a little bit, you know?
Well, first of all, it's the Giants' record with Daniel Jones as the starter. That's number one. It's not Daniel Jones' record, Joe. It's the team's record with Daniel Jones. I mean, for example, they have not won a game on Monday Night Football with Daniel Jones as the starting quarterback. Okay? That's how it should be worded. So it's 2-3 elements in play, not just the guy on an island. I will say this, though. If your point is about the context of the opponent, the bottom line is they're going to put prominent teams on Monday Night Football, aren't they, Joe? Right? You know, you're going to showcase.
That's the thing that
you
they
can't
don't bring up in that context.
Yeah, but the point is, I would not use that as an argument to counter the team's record. When you are on primetime, you're going up against the best caliber opponent because the league wants to showcase them. So it's not going to get any easier. The point is, you're not going to look at the 2025 schedule and the Giants, they're going to put on Monday Night Football, and the league is going to go, well, we'll put them against the 3 worst teams from the previous record, the previous season. They don't do that. That's not how primetime games operate.
No, that's true. That's true. You know you're in for a real dogfight or a tug of war if you're going to be in prime time. And so yes, most of the time it's going to be against a higher level of competition. But historically, the Giants have been a poor primetime team. That's just the way it's been. I can't give you the common thread because the Giants have had some really good teams. They won 4 Super Bowls, but their primetime record smells.
Yes. All right. Second stat, and I think Michael Eisen might have mentioned it in his article on the app as well, about how drastically Jones's passing stats drop off when he's under pressure. But without knowing how that compares to how other quarterbacks' stats drops off when they're under pressure, we don't know if that's a good stat, a bad stat, or, if he's just doing what other quarterbacks do.
Well, you're talking about the rest of the league and how they perform. I mean, I know the one guy that stands out to me, when Justin Herbert was a rookie, because this was brought up too, he did not have a very good offensive line because Rashawn Slater wasn't there, Corey Linsley wasn't there, and then since they've done a nice job. Herbert's numbers his rookie year, I don't have them in front of me, but when he was a rookie, he actually performed better under duress and under pressure than when the pocket was present for him to survey the field.
That's a rarity, by the way.
It is. It's a rarity, but to just add to your point, I don't know the rest of the NFL landscape off the top of my head, but there are quarterbacks, Joe, where they do perform actually very well despite the fact that they have been under constant pressure. And Herbert's rookie year, to me, is the best example of that.
I mean, I can't give you the stats, but if Tom Brady is the GOAT, and I think we would all agree with that, well, guess what?
Yeah.
There's a definite proof positive, and I'm not going to give you the numbers because I didn't track the numbers, but it's proof positive. It is well known throughout history. Tom Brady was not as effective when he was getting hit a lot, and he was under significant amounts of pressure. That's the way most quarterbacks are.
Right. So, because they throw that stat out, but as you said, that's true for most quarterbacks. So, sometimes you have to take these stats with a grain of salt, is all I'm saying.
Sure. And we are definitely agreeing with you from that standpoint, Joe, and appreciate the phone call. That's why we were talking about, how I feel, and I think you feel the same way.
We talk about it all the time. Stats are only good in context.
Yeah.
You pull them out individually, most of the time they're not worth a whole lot.
Well, specifically, though, I don't like quarterback records. I think they're pointless to
totally
throw out.
Agree.
It's the team record with the quarterback because you don't know. You could have played all of those games on Monday Night Football, just to use the last caller's point, and you could have lost all 3 games or all 4 games, whatever it was, by 1 score. So it could have been the defense was on the field for every single one of those late games and they gave up a score. You have to know how exactly the result panned out in order to justify why that number is being utilized. Joel is in West Palm Beach joining us here on BBKO. What's happening, Joel?
Hey, Lance, Paul. Good afternoon. How you guys doing?
Hello. How are you?
How about yourself?
Good, man. Super excited for this game. Obviously, must win for us here to kind of have our playoff hopes still in the future for this year. I can't understand our coaches with the whole left tackle situation. I know they tried kind of bouncing everybody around on training camp, but it's like Azuda, that's like our best option for left tackle. I know we have a couple of other players there, on the practice squad, but why couldn't we get somebody manageable, off the street or sign off somebody from another practice squad? It's just frustrating that we paid Jones all this money, and then that's what we have to protect him is Azudu, that is a guard now playing tackle.
Well, you're talking about the game of musical chairs that's going on? Is what you're frustrated by? Just so that I understand where you're coming from?
Yeah, more the left tackle situation. If anything, having a real left tackle out there on the field come tonight.
The closest thing they would have in terms of another option would have put Matthew Pert out there. And we've already heard a lot of complaints about Pert because he gave up pressures in the Jets preseason game. The Giants believe that he's actually better suited to right tackle than he is left tackle, which is why they're going to Azudu first as the left tackle option. That's number one. Number two is that Azudu has a lot of experience playing left tackle when he was at North Carolina.
Yeah, they moved him around.
Okay?
Yep.
Number three, anybody who can play left tackle is already in the league somewhere and not walking around on the street looking for a job because those guys don't grow on trees.
Yeah, you're not getting a savior here. The other thing, just to add to your point, Paul, and I hope I wasn't cutting you off.
No, I'm
done.
I'm done.
Something else. Bobby Johnson, Joel, the offensive line coach for the Giants, he spoke to the media on Friday, and you can check it out on Giants.com, and he was asked about why they feel so good about moving Azudu out to left tackle, And Paul, I'm not sure if you heard this. He said that during the draft process, they watched the Zudu against Jermaine Johnson, who's now on the Jets in college. And they thought in that game, actually, he moved a position. He started, I think, inside and then moved to the outside. And they were very impressed within a game how well he adjusted and the caliber of the opponent. And that was a big reason why they wanted to draft him. So it's not just what they're seeing in practice, it's the experience, to Paul's point, of what he did in college, why they feel good about him being the best option at left tackle.
Gotcha. Now, if I could just bring up another point.
Sure.
I just jumped on, so I'm not sure if you guys touched on it yet, but if you did, my apologies. Barkley, if he's not anywhere at 85, 90%, do you play him for tonight?
Well, we talked about this earlier, and we'll let you go on that note. I think, Paul, you were aiming towards no, and I was definitely no, and I mentioned that on Friday. I don't think you chance it with respect to an ankle injury. I think you wait until he gets more recovery time. I understand Barkley is a game changer, and he's another threat, and he's another weapon, but you can't risk the fact that what could be a 3-week injury becomes 7 to 8 weeks, and then he's truly going to be a spectator. I just don't think it's worth it, especially knowing you have another game coming up very quickly on Sunday.
Barkley, let me give you a number here, okay? When Barkley was injured in 2019, and he had that sprained ankle that he played through, and still rushed for 1,000 yards, okay? He was running for 77 yards a game, okay, on a little over 16 and a half attempts per game. Now, those are really good numbers, but the truth is, last year, he was at over 18 carries a game and over 80 yards a game on the ground. Now, you may say, well, that's not a whole lot different. No, but it is, because when you're playing on a gimpy ankle for the better part of 2 months of the season, you don't have the same explosion or potential to make a big play. And that's where Barkley's extra value comes in as a headache player. You don't want teams to say, we know Barkley's only 75% for the next 2 months, so guess what? We don't have to worry about him breaking a big one off or making a big play in the passing game. We pretty much know that he's kind of limited. He doesn't really have that extra second gear, so we're not going to worry about him as much. Part of Barkley's value is the respect he commands and the intimidation factor that when he's right, he can score from anywhere on the field in the passing game or the running game.
And in 2021, you brought up 19. That was the first time he had the ankle injury. 2021 was the second time. That one he missed 4 games. Now, that season, the numbers weren't as impressive as the previous year. But, I remember distinctly that when he came back, he just didn't seem to have that same game-changing ability.
He did not.
Paul, in 2021.
I concur totally.
And, I'm bringing up the game log. So that season, the first few games, and once again, the run game that season wasn't jumping through the roof. But, he had a few games where he was in the teens. He had 50 yards or so. And then in the initial games right after the injury, he played Tampa Bay, and that was a lopsided game. He had 6 carries in that game for 25 yards and 40 yards in the next game on 13 carries. You do the math. That's 3 yards per carry we're talking about. It wasn't that explosion. Later on in the season, they played Dallas. He had 15 carries for 50 yards, 3 yards a carry, 15 for 32, 2 yards a carry. And then the last game against Washington, 11 for 30, just over 2 yards a carry.
In short, can we agree on this? Saquon Barkley has to be Saquon Barkley for the Giants to have a real chance to be a playoff team. Agreed?
100%.
And that probably is the best reason that you could give somebody for sitting him out tonight, because he's got to be himself for the Giants to truly be where they want to be.
And this idea, I know a lot of people would throw out, Paul, to counter that. They would say, well, you got to put him out on the field because you give the defense something to think about. But the problem is, if the defense notices that he's not himself,
if they don't respect him,
they're going to get to the point where they're like, we're not worried about him. We don't have to worry about bringing over an extra guy or having somebody spy him. So defenses are not stupid. They're not naive. They're eventually going to catch on. Same thing with defensive coordinators. They know what a player looks like right prior to an injury versus how he operates after an injury. So that's more of a reason why it's not worth it in the big picture of things. But you've got Daniel Jones and his running ability. And that, to me, is something to watch tonight because they only gave him 2 at-bats in the Niners game. And I understand game flow definitely played a role in that, but I think you want Seattle to have to get out and tackle him, and you want Seattle to have something additional to think about where Daniel can salvage a play. I don't think the Niners had much to think about.
You mentioned something the other day, I guess it was on Friday's show, about how Seattle has played stationary quarterbacks.
Correct.
Do you know that quarterbacks have only rushed the ball 5 times through 3 weeks against the Seattle defense, which further illustrates your point? That's the fewest that any defense has faced in terms of opposing quarterback rushes.
Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff, Andy Dalton, by the way, just so that our audience knows.
So here's the Seattle defense, which is absolutely rigid against the run, giving up 2.9 yards a carry. All right, top 3, I believe, in the National Football League. But they have not faced the various rushing weaponry that a mobile quarterback can bring to the table. Now, I say that because it's definitely relevant tonight. It gives me very, 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 very bad nervous twitches because you know how I don't like to see Daniel Jones run more than 4 times a game. I don't think that's a really good way to go, certainly on a consistent basis. But if you have to do it tonight and Daniel has to take off 8 or 9 times, well, then God bless him. Cross your fingers. Hope he doesn't get hurt and hope that it proves fruitful enough for the Giants to win the game.
And on the season, whether Saquon has played or not, Daniel just has not had a huge amount of runs overall. I know he did have the 13 against Dallas, but remember, part of that was not because of scheme, but it was because Dallas was going right. Daniel found the opening left. Mm-hmm. The point is, I would not use the Cowboys game as an example of, oh, well, look at how much the Giants had Daniel run. I think Daniel was running to adjust, Paul, to what Dallas was presenting him. I'm talking about you go into a game where you say, we're scheming for Daniel
He's
to run.
going to be part of the run game.
We have not seen much of that. That's my point. Now, if there's any game to unleash that a little bit, I think you want to test the boundaries of this Seattle defense because I know this is a minuscule sample size, and as I've emphasized, they haven't played the most mobile guys, but Andy Dalton ran 2 times, and I thought Andy actually had some success, right?
He did.
Extending a play. So
Andy Dalton.
Yeah, Andy Dalton of all guys, when he got out and ran a little.
Cement shoes.
Yeah, correct. He, took off and he averaged over 5 yards per carry.
Oh,
so if Andy could do that, then, you might as well take Daniel Jones out for a ride and see what he could do, especially since the Niners, and I listened to all the San Francisco players. I don't know if I mentioned this to you when we were on following the game, but they spoke to the media after the game, and they said going into that game, they had anticipated that there was going to be a lot of Daniel Jones running. They prepared for it because they knew the Niners had had trouble with quarterbacks playing a prominent role in the run game. So they knew going in, all right, we're going up against Daniel Jones, he's going to run. And they were a bit surprised that it only took off 2 times because the Niners went in, all right, if Saquon's not on the field, then our primary focus is on Daniel Jones. So Seattle's thinking the same thing. We don't have to worry about Saquon. We are going to worry about Daniel Jones. The question is, are you going to give the Seahawks something, Paul, to worry about? And that lies in the hands of the Giants tonight, more so than the opposition.
Look, Daniel Jones is going to have to be the star of the game tonight, whether or not he winds up running 5 times or 9 times, okay? That's almost like inconsequential to me. I think he probably is going to have to run it more than I'd like him to, but he's going to have to do some things through the air to beat Seattle. Case closed. This group of receivers and this tight end, Darren Waller, who had a tough game in San Francisco, they better make sure they make the plays that need to be made. And if they got to go above the X's and O's to make a couple of those too, well, damn it, they better do it. Because this game's going to require that kind of output and that kind of effort.
Jared Goff in that game that went to overtime, he had 323 yards and 3 touchdowns. They bottled up the Lions' rushing attack. And then you look at what Seattle did against Carolina. Also, they took away the run game, and it was Andy Dalton, who is a polished veteran, but he had to rely on the DJ Charks of the world and the Adam Thielens. Dalton threw for 361 yards in that game. But here's where the balance has to come into play, and I'll leave with this final note. Dalton, Paul, he threw the ball 58 times and was sacked 3 times. That means that the Panthers had Andy Dalton drop back 61 times in that last game.
Yeah.
I understand you're talking about Daniel's got to make plays through the air. If Daniel drops back 61 times,
oh, man.
I do not like the chances for the Giants tonight.
That's usually not a good idea for anybody.
Yeah. Well, it's not good for anybody, I agree, but if you have a veteran, maybe you can breathe. Frank Reich could say, okay, Andy, who he's also not our primary starter, we could make him be the sacrificial lamb for today. But no, you do not want to put a quarterback in that position, which just goes to show you how difficult it's been for most teams to run the ball against Seattle.
Yes.
And I think that's what really we're spelling out
You
here.
have to open up the running game by using the pass. This is the reverse of what the conventional wisdom is. You need the pass to open up the run. You try to get out of this game in the beginning, get out of the gate with a running game against Seattle, they will shut that down, and now you're going to be totally one-dimensional the rest of the night, and that's a problem.
Because the Giants never gave the Niners defense a reason for those safeties to back up a little bit, right?
Never did.
They had all the time in the world to just survey the front.
Never did.
So can you give Reek Woolen and Witherspoon and Adams and Julian Love and Quandre Diggs, can you give them a reason to backpedal a little bit tonight? That will also tell an awful lot. All right, that's going to wrap up Monday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. Today's episode, part of the Giants platforms everywhere and Giants.com/podcast. We are back up and running again tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, as well as the rest of the week. For Paul Dottino,
6:15 tonight, right, John? 6:15 tonight, pregame show. See you then.
We'll speak to you on Tuesday. Have a good one.